dog's gonna be barking at the door in a minute. So we are live back on Facebook talking about today the women of Champagne, and I'm super excited to chat about these ladies. Have you been drinking a lot of champagne lately, Claudine?
Always.
I know a lot about this.
This school of champagne is not for special occasions. It's for any day.
I really like that you say that because I never really thought about that before. I always kind of had it mentally in my head. Until I moved to France, I was like, well, let's just drink champagne all the time. But even at events, like I don't really see French people just drinking champagne unless it's like a party or a baptism or whatever. So it's interesting to think like it's wine, like just drink it.
It is. And it doesn't have to be. And it's also the perfect beverage to have for breakfast, lunch, or dinner.
This is true. It makes me very happy.
Yeah, put a little juice in there on a Sunday morning, and it's totally acceptable.
Oh, Catherine's here. Hi, Catherine.
Bonjour, Catherine.
I hope you're having a glass of champagne right now. I know it's probably very late there. What time is it? It's like
10
o'clock. But it's never like, as we just said, it's always a good time to drink some champagne.
Always a good time.
And I learned so much about these ladies of Champagne from you. It feels like, hey, Phyllis. It feels like the ladies really kind of ran Champagne in some ways.
They did. It's pretty awesome.
Yeah. And a lot of these people, I knew nothing about them. So I'm excited to share all this information. Oh, Rosé's good too, though. I mean,
Rosé's always good too.
We love Rosé.
It's hot. It's probably hot down there in Dallas too.
She's drinking one happy me. I completely agree. Champagne just makes me so happy. It might be all the sugar.
And the bubbles.
The bubbles. Tiny bubbles make me happy.
I have some, of course.
Yes. I love your glass, too. It's so pretty. Show that glass off. How so pretty is that? Did you get that in France?
No, it's my family, like I think my great aunts and everybody had a huge collection of stuff. Like we have one big cupboard that's basically just glasses. And I had some friends come over there like, oh, should we have brought glasses? I was like, nope. There's so many different ones that look like this, and
they're pretty.
They're so pretty. They don't hold a lot, so they're usually not like the preferred method.
Yeah. You need more of a flute to fit more in there. Tina's here. Hey, Tina. Phyllis is burning up in Dallas. But at least in Dallas, they don't have the humidity, right? It's just
dry. Oh no, I think they do.
They do? It's like nasty humidity.
I don't know.
Yeah. Well, it's more reason to drink some cold beverages with bubbles in them.
For sure.
Oh, a Montmartre grasshopper. I don't know what that is, Catherine. You're going to have to tell me what that is. Is that like absinthe? That sounds like absinthe to me because it's a grasshopper's green. And they were drinking a lot of absinthe in Montmartre.
They did. They love the absinthe.
It's kind of why they all kind of lost their minds a little bit. I mean, that makes for art, right? That's come up a lot in the podcast that, drinking is just as creative. It's like,
sometimes I've noticed where like sometimes if I even just have like a half a glass of wine, sometimes it just like it really comes flowing. Like I can just be like,
like you're like drinking knocks out your ego. You're just so chill. You're like, I can do anything.
Yeah. You're like, yeah, I got this. Then you read it later. What was I talking about?
Just don't write it down. Don't leave voice messages.
That's true. That's true. Don't reach out to old flames.
Oh, Phyllis, the humidity's not bad. Yeah, Texas is dry. So
that's good.
Tina, we love having you here. South Mississippi. Yeah, you know about humidity in Mississippi.
Oof.
I'm from Maryland. We know all about humidity too. So anyway, we can start chatting about some of these champagne ladies. I think you might know some of these things, but at the same time, maybe you don't. I don't need alcohol. I talk too much naturally. Likewise. And let's see here. I guess I'll have Claudine kind of introduce the ladies we're going to be talking about. And then you guys can just give some guesses because we're going to give you a little bit of fun trivia again. And then you could talk about who you think it is out of the ladies we're going to talk about. So I'll let Claudine talk about our champagne ladies.
Yes. Well, when you're talking about champagne and you're talking about women, there's one that that's the first one that comes to mind, of course, is Madame Clicquot, who we know as Veuve Clicquot. She's the one that everybody kind of thinks of, but there's quite a few other ones. And not only are these the ladies of Champagne, but they're the widows of Champagne, because each one of them took over the house after their husband died, which was actually the only way to do it at the time. Women couldn't run a business unless they were a widow.
Oh, I didn't know that. So that's why all these ladies were doing it alone, because they literally had to lose their husband.
Yeah, they had to kick the bucket, then they took over.
Wow. Well, I'm shocked that they even let them do it even with that, because normally they'd have like an uncle or something that would be their chaperone for life.
Yes. I'm sure there was tons of men in the business still. But these fantastic ladies were, the face of it. So there's Madame Clicquot, of course. There's Lilly Bollinger and Louis Pommery. And then there's Marie-Louise Lanson de Nonancourt. She is kind of a quieter one, but I put her on there just because I also love Lanson champagne.
Yeah.
And then Mathilde Emile Laurent-Perrier. So those are kind of the main women. Some of them were from Madame Clicquot goes back to the 19th century, and most of the other ones are a little bit later on, including Lilly, who was actually in the 20th century, and her husband died during right at the start of World War II. So you have a lot of these women that kind of went back and kind of pioneered, and then you have, one that kind of comes along a little bit later. And now today there's tons of women, of course, in Champagne.
Mm-hmm. It seems kind of natural at this point. Yeah. And do we know how much of Champagne is run by women now? Do we have any idea?
I'm not sure, but I know that there's quite a few, because I know that I went to Taittinger, and I believe there's a woman in charge of that one. Laurent Perrier now is still run by the Nonancourt family, and it's a woman that's in charge there too. So there's quite a few of them that are still women run.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's cool. I think that's really interesting. Now, for our listeners, do you guys have any favorite champagnes? Do you recognize any of those names? I'm sure you do. Oh, it's good to see you here, Travis. Travis and Megan, I shot their wedding a long time ago. That was like when I first became a photographer, and now they actually work in wine as well. I think you sell wine. They're doing Winey Parents. Look them up on Instagram. It's really fun.
Fantastic.
And Tina is always here to learn. But do you guys have any favorite bubbles? I mean, do you have? I know that we probably shouldn't be talking about this on the Champagne live, but I have a lot of friends in Paris who say they prefer Cremant, which I feel like is sacrilege. But they say that Champagne for them tastes like mushrooms or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, it depends. Like the ones when they bottle, like when they do a specific vintage, I've tasted some that I'm going to say the word wrong, but it's like Millimise, something like that. And it's when it's a specific vintage. Most of the time Champagne isn't. It's most usually multiple vintages combined together. But this one, sometimes I've had one that, I mean, it was like mushroomy, funky, like,
fungus.
So I did it for an event. And so it was like, we really had to be careful what we paired it with for the food.
Yeah.
But it was really good. But I do actually love Cremant. There's a one that's Laurent. I can't remember the name, but there's one of them that's a rosé Cremant, and it's fantastic. And you could get it for, in the States for like $16 a bottle.
Yeah. I mean, Cremant, the only difference between Cremant and Champagne is it's just not made in the Champagne region.
Yeah. Because it has to be, to be called Champagne, it has to be made in the Champagne region. And anybody that knows me that tries to call their cooks or their Prosecco Champagne, I quickly correct them. And a friend of mine's like, oh, I know.
Yeah, no, I mean, I can't go wrong with either one. I like Cremant and Champagne. Yeah. I'm okay with all the bubbles. Phyllis is a Taittinger person. And then Tina, the black bottle one with strawberries floating in it. Do we know what that one is?
I'm not sure.
You have to tell us what that sounds really yummy, though. I like that. I think that anything with bubbles works for me.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so let's get started. We're going to ask you guys a question. Just give your guess out of which widow you think it is, and of the ones we just named. But even if you don't have any idea, just throw a name out there, and I think we're just going to be all learning a lot today. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So who invented the riddling system in 1816? Now, you might not know what the riddling system is. So Claudine actually has a great example behind her of what that is.
Fix this. So this is actually a riddling rack. This is what they do when they this fantastic woman created this, and what it is that they did it to come up with when they're making champagne. The whole reason for champagne to get the bubbles and everything, so it has yeast in it, and so they call it the lees. And so what they were doing is like you'd have the champagne and you would try to rest it to get all of that out of the bottle. So when you go, if you've been to Champagne, has anybody been to Champagne? When you go, you see a bottle like this with a like a cap on it, like you would have at your bottle of Coke. And so they have those like that. And then so they age it for a long time, and then they put it in these racks, and these racks have holes in them, and you could kind of see how they go down. So they put them in here, and then there's people that they could go at different heights as they move. And then there's somebody that actually comes through, these men that come through, and they turn them and they slam it back in there. So they're constantly trying to get that to the end of the bottle. Mm-hmm. So then they at the end of it, they freeze it and they open up the cap and they're able to pull out this frozen little bit. So, but this woman created this because she was trying to figure out a way to make this happen. So she went home one night and cut up her kitchen table and cut holes in it. And today, this is a riddling rack that somebody gave me, which I hounded them for years if they ever wanted to get rid of it. But it's so cool because it actually is from Champagne, and it says Epernay at the top.
That's super cool. I mean, you have like an original riddling rack in your office now.
Yeah, I was going to start making up some, champagne in my
I think you should start. You should definitely have a vineyard.
Yeah, the Blue Blanc Rouge label. Why
Hemingway champagne, Catherine's like, you have a riddling rack in your home?
Yeah. You should have seen, it's been in the garage actually. So I had to like put it on towels and like drag it through the kitchen. And then once I got to the carpet, it's now in my office where it'll probably stay forever.
I cannot move it again. It's way too
really
heavy.
It's double-sided too. So it stands, like you open it up and so it just stands on its own.
What is that thing made out of?
Just wood.
Oh, it's wood. Yeah.
Just wood.
Yeah, it's really interesting when you go down into the caves in Champagne and, you see them just everywhere.
Yeah.
And you can see kind of the sediment in there. So do we have any guesses on who invented that system? It's one of her women.
I know she read the book.
Yeah, she might know the answer to this one.
It was, in fact, Madame Clicquot.
Yep. She was one of our super champagne ladies.
Yeah. And so when she came up, like now, a lot of times when you go, most of the champagne houses, if you do tours, they all still have these. A lot of them, like they'll actually have at Clicquot, you'll go down there and they actually have just rows and rows and rows of them with bottles in it. Some of them also use these great big, huge metal contraptions that are like great big, huge boxes that could hold hundreds of bottles. And then they do the same riddling thing, but they do it with a machine.
Okay.
So they get the idea. But men that do this and do the riddling, they could do hundreds of bottles like in a minute.
Wow.
It's pretty fascinating. If you could look at them online, they just do it so fast. It's pretty fast.
Yeah. Now they have machines do it. I'm sure some people are doing it by hand still, but mainly it's by machine now. It's all good.
Yeah.
I thought I had read somewhere or heard somewhere that the champagne that's made in Champagne, obviously, there can be no heavy machinery used in the vineyards, that it all still has to be very like manual labor. I don't know if that's true or I made that up in my head, but I thought I'd taken a course and it was like, wow, they don't use the heavy equipment in the fields.
Yeah, I'm sure there's still definitely some, then there's, the natural champagnes and things like that. And I think there are some houses that do everything like just on their own. I mean, there's some houses that are so small, there's just like, the husband and wife owner and maybe their kid, and that's only people involved in the winemaking.
I love little small family businesses like that. Mm-hmm. So Madame Clicquot invented our riddling system. Now you can tell your friends that when you're drinking champagne.
Yeah.
All right, let's read the next one. I'll let Claudine read this one.
Who said, I drink champagne when I'm happy and when I'm sad. Sometimes I drink it when I'm alone. When I have company, I consider it obligatory. I trifle with it if I'm not hungry, and I drink it when I am. Otherwise, I never touch it unless I'm thirsty.
I mean, sounds like a lady I want to hang out with.
I know. I was like, that's going to be the motto of my life.
Chanel. I mean, that does sound like something Chanel would say.
She did say something kind of close to that.
Yeah, this was actually one of the people who made champagne.
Mm-hmm.
Let's name our ladies again. We have Clicquot, we have Bollinger, Laurent-Perrier, Pommery, Lanson.
Yeah, that's it.
So do you think it was any of those? I mean, Coco probably definitely said that. She said a close quote to that.
Yeah.
Zelda, yeah. All these crazy ladies that I'd like to hang out with.
Our Coco podcast comes out tomorrow, which will be interesting for people to hear their thoughts.
Yeah, definitely listen to the Coco history tomorrow. It is a very fascinating one. I've learned a lot of things about Coco that I did not know. Bollinger, that's a good guess. Pommery, good guess. Well, it goes to Phyllis because it was Bollinger, Lilly Bollinger.
Yes, and she, Lilly actually is our lady of the 20th century, and her husband died in 1941 during the war, and she kind of took over the house, and she would, at the same time, like she would kind of became like the little mother of the town, where she'd take care of people and take care of the wounded. At the time during both World War I and World War II, champagne played a huge role because of where they were located, because they're so close to, to Alsace and to Germany, that they had all these underground caves. And so like you go to Clicquot, you still go down to those caves, and they actually have like red crosses painted on the wall, because that's where it was like the hospital.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that.
Yeah. So Lilly would take care of everybody and kind of mother the town and stuff. And she, after the war, she was sending her champagne to England, which a lot of these ladies figured out as well, because it was England really loved the champagne. And she was quoted in an article later, kind of in like the 50s, and that was her quote, which I think is fantastic.
It's a great quote. I mean, I definitely want to hang out with Lilly if I could have hung out.
I mean, it basically says you're drinking champagne all the time, so it's great.
It's always a good time to drink bubbles.
Yes.
Definitely. All right, let's read our next one. Who catered her champagne to the dry cider-loving British? So this lady, she went after the British clientele, not so much the French in the beginning. And the British were known for loving dry cider, which pretty much went pretty well with champagne. So who do you think was trying to cater to the Brits selling their champagne?
When champagne first, like the beginning with the champagne that we knew, like the Clicquot champagne, it was incredibly sweet, like sugar bomb sweet, like
wow,
so this is
completely different than what we have now.
And this gal, when she went to school in England, and that's where she kind of figured out where everybody sure loves drinking this dry cider.
Yeah. She knew her customers, her clientele. So who do you think was trying to sell to the Brits in the very beginning? Was it Clicquot? Was it Bollinger? Was it Laurent-Perrier, Pommery, Lanson? Give a guess. I mean, it's kind of hard. I didn't know a lot of these facts, but it's really interesting learning them now. I think I'd seen like a documentary about some of this. So I'm amazed that all these women were able to do so much during that time. And the fact that a lot of them, survived World War II and all the craziness with that.
Yeah. I mean, Clicquot survived, she went through everything. She was born, during the Revolution, and died in 1866, but she went through quite a bit there too.
She lived through the Revolution and 2 world wars. I mean, that's wild. Blair's here from Atlanta. Welcome, Blair. We're doing trivia, and you have to guess who said it. So who catered her champagne to the dry cider-loving British? Was it Laurent-Perrier, Pommery, Clicquot, or Bollinger? Lanson. Anybody have any guesses? I mean, I wouldn't know this. Claudine's teaching me a lot. More information to share when I'm drinking now.
Yeah.
So actually it was Laurent-Perrier. She shared her recipe with the British. She was selling to the Brits. Maybe Claudine can tell us more about that.
Yeah, it was actually 2 of them. Pommery and Laurent-Perrier both discovered the English's love of dry cider. And Pommery actually was just like, she was the one who went to school there. And she was the one who thought, I wonder if they love cider. Maybe I should do, because cider is bubbly and this, and she went back and actually they cut the sugar in half to what they were originally making. And then when they shipped it to England, they loved it.
That was so genius. Ellen's got a question for you, Claudine. She said, may I ask a question? Do you prefer a coupe or a flute when you're drinking?
Well, I love these pretty little coupes, but actually the glass I prefer to have it in is actually a wine glass. And a lot of people say it's actually better to put it in a wine glass than it is to put it in a flute, but a wine glass is bigger.
I think we both agreed the bottle works too. It depends on what kind of day you're having.
I need to get it into my system I'm good with.
Yeah, I mean, it depends on what kind of day we're having, right?
Yes, yeah.
But the wine glass is pretty useful because you don't have to keep refilling all the time.
That's true. I mean, sometimes you're, 1 a.m. underneath the Eiffel Tower and you break one of those champagne glasses, so you have to drink out of the bottle.
Yeah, I agree. More is more.
Yes.
Wine glass, Phyllis agrees.
Mm-hmm.
Is that where the brut or more dry sparkling wine comes from, the less sweet? So she's talking about who you just mentioned.
Yeah, and then we have a little question about that coming up here.
Oh yeah, we'll get to that, Blair. Hold up for us.
Last time I kept giving everything away before.
I know, we gave the answers to all our women in our other questions.
The lost generation.
All right, so let's read the next one.
What was Colette's favorite champagne?
So who do you think?
Hey, Carol.
Carol's here.
Yeah, the famous French writer Colette, who we also have an episode about coming up for the podcast.
Yes, we do. Colette was a fascinating woman.
Mm-hmm.
The black bottle was, oh yeah, I know that one. Is that Prosecco though? I think that's Prosecco. I buy that often when I'm in the States because Prosecco is really much cheaper here than champagne. Also, when I'm in Italy with my fiance, of course, the Italians are like, Prosecco. Don't be talking about champagne in Italy. Yeah. Not okay. All right, guys. So who do you think Colette preferred to drink? Was it Pommery? Was it Clicquot? Was it Perrier? Bollinger? This is actually the one I visited, was the one she preferred. It was Pommery. Yeah. I loved visiting that place. It was so beautiful. And she was famous because she created an art exhibition in the cab.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So people would go down and look at art while they were visiting the Champagne.
Yeah, and I saw that they still do, like every year they do a contemporary art exhibition down in the caves.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's still paintings on the wall, statues. I mean, it's like a museum in a cave. It's really interesting. Mm-hmm. And if you end up going to Champagne just randomly and you didn't book tickets in advance, because like Clicquot and stuff tends to sell out months in advance, Pommery, we just walked right in. Like it wasn't like a backup or anything like that.
Yeah, and we did an episode about Madame Clicquot, but I've been to Veuve Clicquot, and I was like, the first thing I had to do when we pulled into Champagne, we already had reservations, and I was like, I need to go to the mothership, and I was actually disappointed with the tour, what they did. I thought they could have done so much more. Mm-hmm. So go to Taittinger, go to Pommery, go to any of those. They're really fantastic.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, Tina, brut is used to kind of describe the bubbles, the dryness. Yeah,
it's more of a dry.
Yeah, brut means more dry. Mm-hmm. And it can describe Cremant, it can describe Champagne, it can describe Prosecco as well.
Yeah. And now today, brut Champagne is the 75% of the champagne that they ship out of Champagne around the world is actually brut Champagne. That's more most people prefer the brut than the really overly sweet, because like the overly sweet, you can't sit and drink a bottle of the overly sweet. I mean, you can, but
it gets a little too desserty.
Yes, a little too much.
So Pommery was Colette's favorite drink, and you'll learn more about Colette in our podcast. If you're wondering, someone asked about the Coco podcast on tomorrow. It comes on at 6 a.m. French time. So Paris is 6 hours ahead. So by the time you wake up in the morning, it will be on the website, and you can look for it on Spotify, iTunes, or you just Google La Vie Creative podcast and you'll find it. And we talk all about Coco tomorrow. All right. So the next question, who debuted their champagne at a restaurant in the Eiffel Tower? So that's the Brabant restaurant.
Brabant, yes.
Yeah, it was a restaurant inside the Eiffel Tower. They debuted their champagne there. That's pretty cool to like show off your champagne for the first time inside the Eiffel Tower. I mean, that's pretty bougie. I like that. I appreciate that. So who do you think did that? Who could be so French as to debut their champagne inside the Eiffel Tower? Was it Pommery, Perrier, Bollinger, Clicquot? Yeah, I agree, Tina. You would definitely be staying up all night if you drink that much sugar.
And you'd be bouncing off the beat. Like, yeah, you'd be really happy. You'd be bouncing off the walls.
Definitely. Maybe would have a panic attack. Yeah. Too much sugar. So let's see. The person that debuted their champagne inside the Eiffel Tower was actually Laurent-Perrier. That was the first time they showed off their champagne.
Yeah, and it was she had created it was called the Grand Vin sans sucre. So it was without sugar. So they didn't put any sugar in the second fermentation. So it was it ended up being a much drier champagne.
Angela was correct. Perrier, yes. Angela knows some secrets. I wouldn't have known any of these. I'll let Claudine read the next one.
Which label is the color of a perfect French chicken yolk?
This one was really interesting, and now I'll never look at the bottle the same, because if you drink this, I mean, it's very obviously a very yellow. So you look at the bottle, the label on it is the same color yellow as an egg yolk. And we're talking about French egg yolks, because the French egg yolks, the chickens are happier and the yolk is really yellow.
They're so delicious.
Yeah.
So delicious.
I remember when I first moved to France and I saw they weren't refrigerating the eggs in the store, and I was like, what is wrong with these people? This is gross. I'm going to get sick. And then I learned you don't have to refrigerate eggs. It's just because in America we clean them to make them look prettier. The chicken actually has a natural shell outside that protects, and we make it so clean in America that we have to refrigerate it after.
Yeah. I always buy chicken egg or duck eggs.
Yeah.
And they're closer to like a French chicken egg. Like you have the yolk is like just so like gorgeous yellow and so delicious.
Very pretty. Oh, our ladies know their champagne.
Everybody knows this one.
Yes. I mean, look at it. Clicquot. That is a very chickeny egg color. Yeah.
So they did this, actually. It was after Madame Clicquot had passed, but they decided that one day they were trying to figure out, they wanted to it was just to differentiate one style of wine, and they wanted something different. And somebody actually saw like a egg yolk and was just like, well, that's the perfect color. So
it is a beautiful color, but now I feel like I'll never look at it the same.
Yeah. Now you just think of chicken eggs.
I
do have shoes to match, Phyllis.
I love your pictures with your shoes and your glasses. They're so good.
Yes. I posted a picture yesterday. I didn't put them on today, though, because I was trying to figure out how exactly what I maneuver showing you me wearing my shoes in the video.
How do I show my shoes and be on video?
Without, revealing other things.
Not easily. Wear pants.
Yes.
All right. So who left her family's champagne house to purchase another? So this woman, she ditched her family. They had a champagne house already, but she said, I'm out of here. I'm going to go get another champagne house. I don't need you guys. Do you think that was Perrier, Clicquot, Bollinger, Lanson? I mean, you're going to be learning a lot of this stuff, but I think that's pretty cool. I mean, she already had a champagne house. Why did she leave?
Especially at that time.
Yeah. That was like
far back.
I mean, we're talking 1800s, 1700s, 1800s.
It would have been, let's see. I wrote down the exact time. 1938. So actually not that long ago.
Oh, 1938.
Just like yesterday.
Oh. All right. So this woman went and purchased another champagne house and left her family. Bollinger, that's a good guess. Does anybody else have any other guesses? Tina's discovered her champagne is sparkling wine from Spain. Well, I mean, it all tastes good, right?
Cava, yeah. Cava.
Bubbles is bubble. Yeah. Cava in Spain, Prosecco in Italy, Champagne in France, or Cremant. Bollinger. Actually, it was Lanson. Lanson left her family.
Yeah, she was actually, they had Lanson is another label, which is this one.
Oh, you got them all back there. I love it.
Lanson, she actually left her family, and Laurent-Perrier, she, you know, her house was kind of struggling. It was out of, they said it was out of the 100 champagne houses, it was 97. So it wasn't doing very well. Yeah. And so Lanson, she decided, her family had Lanson champagne, and she decided that she wanted to kind of go and out on her own, and took over this house. And to this day, it's still run by the Nonancourt family, which was Lanson, which was her husband's last name, de Nonancourt. So they still actually head up that same label.
That's very cool. I mean,
the two of the ladies are tied together.
I like it. I wonder if these ladies, like, some of them were around in the same years, right? They overlapped. Mm-hmm. Were they friends? Do we know if they were friendly?
I would think so. I mean, they're probably, you know, having champagne club meetings, talking about, you know, how hard it is to be a lady out on their own.
I think that's cool. They were like the women of success champagne club. Mm-hmm. I hope they were all sharing their champagne, just hanging out, talking about business.
Yeah, complaining about, you know, all these men I have to work with.
Yeah, I can only imagine those meetings.
Yeah, Lance is actually really hard to find. It was in they stopped shipping it to the U.S., and it's only been in the last few years that it's actually been coming back into the U.S. again. So some of the labels you actually can't get. Mercier is another great place to visit there in Epernay. Mm-hmm. That's an amazing, they do an amazing job with their tour and their caves and everything. And you can't get that in the United States at all.
And why is that?
I don't know. I think, well, it's so expensive. It's getting more expensive all the time. I mean, actually, but it's funny because I thought, you know, the first time I went to Paris, I was like, oh, I'm going to get, you know, a bottle of Clicquot for dirt cheap. It's kind of pretty much the same price. It's not that different.
Yeah, I was kind of surprised too. Yeah. The prices, I mean, they're around 50 euros, 45 euros. Yeah. If you get a Cremant, then it goes down a lot. It's like 25.
Yeah, but the champagne's it's kind of pretty similar, which is kind of surprising.
But I found Prosecco is ridiculously cheaper.
Yeah. Well, there's a reason for that.
Yeah. Right. Don't compare.
I'm always French first.
I hope my fiance is not watching this.
I know. Sorry. Sorry, G.
So let's read the next one, Claudine.
Who was one of the early pioneers of sending champagne to England and Russia?
Wow, sending champagne to England and Russia. So do we think that was Clicquot, Perrier, Bollinger, Lanson? Sending champagne to Russia and England. She was the first one to really just like export in general, because usually they were only selling locally in France. Perrier, that's a good guess. Clicquot, good one, Catherine. Anybody else got a guess about who was the first to export their bubbles? Definitely was an entrepreneurial woman. So Catherine's actually right. It was Clicquot.
It was Clicquot. And this was during the time of Napoleon, and he was, you know, there was naval blockades and there was all of this stuff going on. And she figured out a way, because the Russians actually had a real affinity for the very, very sweet champagne. She found a way to get it over into Russia. And the czars absolutely just loved it and wanted even more. So she was setting up basically during a time when most of the houses couldn't be doing anything because of Napoleon's wars and everything that was going on. She actually ended up during that time where everybody was just, you know, sitting back and trying to figure things out. She actually had put all these plans in place. She was basically like, you know, commissioning boats to take, you know, champagne there. She'd take it, you know, thousands of bottles there, and a couple of weeks later she'd have to take them even more.
That's so crazy.
She really did a lot to pioneer the shipping of champagne. And every time I should have brought a little cork, but when you look at the bottle, let's see this backwards thing, you see the little anchor, and that's why. So, and then it's VCP, so it's Veuve Clicquot Ponsardin, which was her last name. But that's why there's a little anchor, and the cork always has that same little emblem on it. So it's kind of a little nod back to, you know, basically what built the company.
That's so cool that she was the first one to like sail around the world selling her champagne. And I love the little anchor. It's such a small detail that you don't really notice on there. It's really cool.
And she has her signatures on here too. So she's pretty awesome.
Yeah, we like her. We're down with her. Catherine said The Widow Clicquot is a fascinating book. Is that the book you're talking about, Claudine?
Yeah. It's a really, really great book.
Let's do that for our book club.
We definitely need to do that.
Russia was fundamental in the making of champagne. That makes sense. More reason to like Russia.
Russia and England basically were, they loved it. So a lot of these houses, most of these women actually built, their business on mostly England, but Madame Clicquot got to those Russians first.
Yeah, I know that England really loved it too, because like you said, it was so sweet and they loved the sweetness.
Yeah.
So the opposite of sweet, as we learned earlier, is brut. And who was the first to sell their brut champagne commercially? So everybody else was selling that sugar desserty champagne, and this woman took it and turned it into a brut champagne, which is more dry. That's what brut means. And it was the first commercial brut champagne. So do we think that was Bollinger, Lanson, Perrier, Clicquot? Carol went to the Champagne de Sousa house. Oh, is this her name?
Yeah, her last name.
Ypernay is so beautiful. I shot a bachelorette party there. But it's so easy to like just walk down the street to each house. I mean, they're all lined up next to each other when you go to Ypernay. It's really pretty.
So pretty.
Who sold their first brut champagne commercially? So the answer is actually Perrier. Perrier created the brut champagne commercially. Yeah,
so she, piggybacked on what they, with England and the taste of cider, and she was the first one that commercialized. She was the first one to commercially sell it.
That's very cool. Very ahead. Bollinger was a good guess. Carol. All right, next one Claudine's going to read for us.
Who had one of the very few vineyards not affected by the phylloxera epidemic?
So what was that?
So that was something that went through in the 1860s, and it kind of just ravaged all of the vineyards of France. And it basically it was an insect, and it basically just destroyed vineyards, like most of the vineyards of France. And they ended up actually having to save it by grafting some vines actually from the U.S.
Oh, wow.
With there to kind of save it. But I was actually pretty surprised to realize that it didn't there were some that weren't actually destroyed. Some were lucky that they didn't get to it. But it is actually still, I read that actually that it still has happened today. It wasn't, it still has happened in the last, 20 years that there's been vineyards that have actually been subject to it again.
Well, that is something they have to constantly fight against.
Yeah. Oh,
so you can say that the champagne is actually American. Is that what we're saying?
Oh, you could say that kind of. You could say a little bit about all the wine in France.
Oh, it's all a little American because we had to give them their stuff back. We brought it over.
There's a winery in Oregon because we're really known for Pinot Noir, and I can't remember the name of it, but everybody calls them Papa Pinot. And they were one of the ones way back when that was really involved with helping France with some of the Pinot Noir graftings.
I like that. I mean, we've always had each other's backs. We'll just ignore that whole freedom fry period. But other than that, everything was fine.
Yeah, forget that. I know I just went around telling everybody they're actually fries are from Belgium.
Not related.
Not related.
All right.
So that was Bollinger. So she actually had a few vineyards that actually weren't destroyed by it. And she even, they would bottle it up until the last 20 years. They would bottle just from that vineyard and sell it.
Oh, that's interesting. Phyllis knows her champagne. She guessed Bollinger.
Phyllis has done her studying.
Maybe Phyllis read the book as well.
Yeah.
So Which two ladies were tied together at the same label? So this is a two-person answer. These two ladies worked together, same label, same champagne. They were working together. This goes back to what we were talking about, the girls hang out, because a lot of these women overlapped and were making champagne at the same time, which is fascinating. So who do we think worked together? Was it Bollinger, Lanson, Perrier, Clicquot? Give two names that you think worked together. Yeah, that's
thanks, Phyllis.
You just read her captions and you already know the answer. So, two ladies that were tied together, same label. I'm going to let Claudine answer this one.
So this one was Laurent-Perrier and Lanson, where we already kind of talked about that, about how Lanson went in there and bought the company and saved it. So it's kind of interesting too, because there's Lanson, so Lanson, basically the family, the descendants of the family have two separate, houses.
Yeah.
It's like the Hatfields and the McCoys. No, I'm sure they all get along.
Angela knew that one. She guessed Lanson and Perrier. Angela, you must work in champagne or wine because you know all the answers. Unless you're Googling. You're not Googling, are you, Angela?
No cheating.
No cheating. Give your best guess. I trust Angela as an honest person. Let's read the next one. Who could be seen riding her bike through the vines and streets of the city? So I would love to see any of these women riding a bike around a city through their vineyards. I mean, that's actually a great way to get around, because if you ever go to Champagne, I mean, it's very small towns, and obviously going out to the vineyard would be a little easier on a bike. So who do you think was riding their bike around the vineyards? Clicquot, Bollinger, Lanson. That's my Coco barking. Let's see here. Riding their bike through the vineyards. Angela, I knew you weren't Googling. That was a joke. I trust you.
Yeah.
Actually, it was Bollinger. Bollinger would ride her bike around the vineyard, apparently.
Yeah, so Lilly would ride her bike like all over town. And there's actually a really cute picture. I used it in our Instagram stories of her on a bike. Some of these, like Madame Clicquot, like everybody knows her. Some of the other ones, it's kind of hard to find, pictures, especially from, when it was. So it's more paintings.
Yeah.
But Lilly, was later. She was, during World War II, she had a bike and she would ride all over town. She'd ride through the vineyards everywhere. And she died in the 70s. And they actually took her bike and restored it. And they had it completely restored and fixed up. And in 2017, it was the UK, the person in the UK that was in charge of the label for the UK. She actually rode it in this annual bicycle race.
That's so cool.
Lily's bike, which is just so adorable and so cool.
That's super fun. I love that. Mm-hmm. Ride the bike. All right, so this is our last question, ladies and gentlemen. If there are any gentlemen. I'll let Claudine read the last one.
What is the official champagne of James Bond?
So
he always talks about a martini, but there's an official champagne to James Bond.
So who do you guys think that is? James Bond, Bollinger, Clicquot, Lanson, Perrier. Who do we think it is?
Going back to the 70s, so starting with Roger Moore.
Roger Moore, James Bond,
all the way up to now.
Official champagne of James Bond. Any guesses, ladies? I mean, do they actually show it in the movie?
I think so. I mean, I've seen all of those movies, but now I think I should watch one and see, because they have it in all the movies. Apparently it's in all of the movies.
Yeah.
So I might have to watch one just so I could spot it.
Maybe there's no label. There's just anytime you see champagne, it's just there's Bollinger.
Yeah.
I just gave it away. Bollinger, Angela, you got it. You are the winner.
Angela is so good. It was Bollinger. So it started in the 1970s, and it's all the way up until now with Daniel Craig that it's always the official champagne of James Bond. And a lot of these houses, you will see, like, it'll say, this one was the official, there's, I think almost every one of the labels that I've ever looked at is in some way the official champagne of the Queen of England. So I've seen it listed about 6 times by 6 different labels. I'm not really sure which one is, but we do know James Bond is Bollinger.
The official. Oh, Blair got it too. Bollinger. I just feel like Bollinger feels right for James Bond. Just the name. It flows so well. And I can't believe how many widows were running Champagne. I mean, that was the only way to run Champagne. What happened to all their poor husbands?
Well, I mean, they kind of just, Madame Clicquot's husband, he died only a few years after they got married. But, back then when, she was in the 19th century, and when he died, that was, like I said, the only way, because of Napoleon and the different laws that they had put in place, the only way to be for a woman to own a company was to be a widow. So
wonder if there's any foul play involved in that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure Madame Clicquot actually, paved the way for that. I mean, there might have been one or two before, but I'm not sure. I don't think so. But I think Madame Clicquot was kind of the first, and she definitely paved the way for all these other ladies.
Yeah, I mean, it's fascinating history, and we do talk about some of these ladies specifically in the podcast. We just recorded a couple about them, but tomorrow, as we mentioned before, we will talk about Coco Chanel on La Vie Creative podcast, and you can find it anytime tomorrow when you wake up in the morning, because it posts at like 4 a.m. American time. So if you're in America, if you want to listen to it while you're in the shower or whatever, learn a little bit about Coco Chanel, because she lived a very interesting life, and everybody knows Coco, of course, but there's so much that you don't know, and we talk a little bit about that tomorrow.
You might have a different feeling about her after you've listened to the podcast.
Yeah, it's I don't know. I have a lot of emotions about Chanel after learning so much. Angela said, I mean, I think you guys will be allowed in France by next year, but are you going to be in Champagne in April, or in France in April?
Heck yeah.
We hope so.
I really hope so. I'm hoping to be there by September. So when I'm in Paris, I do tours. One of the most popular tour, of course, is I do the Hemingway tour. So I take you to all the places that Hemingway was in Saint-Germain, and also it ties in, with my family and my grandfather, and even my history. And so, but I always end my tours with a glass of champagne at Le Vent Comptoir,
which is a really cool bar where you have to go because it's super fun. And the men that run it are super fun.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like tapas, when you say, like, the food.
It is. And it's back open today. I just got some pictures of from inside, and I was like, oh, it feels so much better now that they're open again.
It's super fun because they hang the menu from the ceiling, and it's like French tapas, because it's like mini versions of French dishes. And you just get all the wine you want, because it's a wine bar, and just order all these little bits of French food. And the two bartenders are super fun. And Claudine is besties with them. And you definitely want to end your tour there. I mean, it's just a great way to end any day, in my opinion.
I know. So I always I love Champagne so much, I always tie it into the tours.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's very French of you as well.
Yes.
So tune in, guys. Every Monday we talk about a famous woman in French history that maybe didn't get as much attention as she deserved. And then every Wednesday we talk to a living creative that has French connections today, still very much alive. Oh, yes, Angela knows all about the butter.
Yep, and the butter. The most famous butter on Instagram, I call it.
I think they're going to be able to keep the butter? Because talk about the butter, Claudine. I mean.
So the butter, you could go through my Instagram, and I'm sure there's about 400 pictures of it. But the butter comes, and comes on a plate, and it's literally like this high. It's just mound of butter. And so it always has a knife in it, and you kind of it goes up and down the bar. And you just kind of take off a little bit. You put it on your butter. Sometimes you take a big slab and stick it on your plate. But the butter is this Bordeaux butter, and it is from Brittany, Normandy, on the coast. It is literally the best butter you've ever eaten in your life. Like, I go in there, I basically am in there so much. And you could tell a story how you saw me, but I'm in there so much that I end up actually kind of working, and I'm like on the outside of the bar, and I'm like people are confused what to order. I help them, but the butter, I tell people, I'm like, no, you need to try the butter because it will change your life. And when I just watch people's face, and they're like it is literally like, it's got just like the perfect amount of like salt crystals in it, and it's just delicious.
It's really good. And I'm worried that because it's self-serve right now, like you said, it's just a giant mound of butter that people take a knife and they pick off of it, and I just want to put the whole thing in my purse and walk out one day. But I don't know if it's going to be self-serve with Corona anymore.
Yeah, I don't know. I'll have to ask them. But yeah, sometimes at the end of the night, they've actually, when it gets down to like, like a third of what it was, I've seen them actually just toss it in the garbage. And sometimes I'm like, no.
What a waste. Do you know
They did send me home with a little bit. They did send me home with a little thing, and I still have it, and it's so like, past its prime and stuff, but I like still use it, even though it's like the salt basically is
it's good
out of it.
I actually have a friend who carries French butter in her bag, and she does it because a lot of times they don't have butter in the French restaurants, which I find so funny because French butter is so delicious. And a lot of times it's only in like the fancy restaurants.
Yeah, they don't serve it with like bread. Like when we, you have bread and butter, Levant is basically one of those places that they bring you this butter, the bread. And the bread in itself is amazing. And I wrote a whole article, basically a love letter to Levant on Bonjour Paris, and basically talk about where the bread is from and the butter and everything. The bread is so good too. Like it's so delicious. And then you put some of that butter on it. Oh, but you can't, I don't think you get Bordier butter in the States. Maybe if you're lucky, maybe somewhere in New York. I've never heard of it here, but you can buy it. What's the really fancy store in the 7th?
Oh, the
Grande Épicerie.
Yeah, the Grande Épicerie.
Yeah, you could go there. They make all these different flavors. Like he makes so many different kinds of the Bordier butter, but you could get them in little, they're wrapped in white. The one with blue writing on it is the one with a little bit of salt on it. And it's fantastic. And I always bring some home.
Yeah, the salt makes all the difference. I didn't even care about butter in America, and then you get to France and you just want to put butter on everything.
Yeah,
I think it comes back to happy cows, like we talked about happy chickens. They're just kind of free ranging, and like they're just happier. They're producing better milk products.
Yeah, and there's the gentleman that makes Bordier butter, and he's just hilarious. And there was a video. Go on like YouTube, or I'll see if I could find it and post it. But there was a video of him making the butter, and they actually do a process that isn't really used anymore in the way they make the butter. And it's something about, you can see them on there. They have these paddles, and they knead the butter. They knead it, so they knead all the flavors together, and that's not really how butter is made anymore because it's more commercialized. But it is just the video, and the guy's actually just like adorable and kind of hilarious.
Oh, I want to meet him.
He's so happy. It's like butters makes you so happy.
That's so fun.
Yeah.
And Catherine said there is actually the Bordier Butter Museum in Saint-Malo. That's so cool. I want to go. Saint-Malo is beautiful anyway. If you're looking for a weekend outside of Paris, go to Saint-Malo.
Yes.
It's beautiful.
Just be at the butter. So the window, like open.
Yeah. Just stuff your suitcase with butter and resell it in America.
Yeah.
Facebook marketplace. Buy some Klicquot butter for me. Croissants. They don't put butter on croissants that I've noticed. I mean,
there's so much butter in it.
Yeah, they cook with it. I mean, that's all a croissant basically is butter.
Yeah. But they do. They dip like to dip the croissants in coffee.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Which I always find strange.
Yes.
I'm not a fan.
I tried it once, but I was like,
That's so good. Well, guys, thank you so much for joining us today. And we'll be doing this in another 2 weeks. Maybe Claudine wants to talk about our next chat.
Yeah, I think we're going to do the different lady artists. So actually you could go and you could study up on this in advance. You could listen to, we've done the podcast already on Suzanne Valadon and Victorine. We'll be doing one that'll come out probably in a couple months about Morisot. But we're going to talk about the different the women artists that we've already talked about. Some of them.
Yeah, a lot of famous women artists, especially up in Montmartre, and they were the muses to like Picasso and Renoir, and just such a fascinating time. So we'll talk about that in 2 weeks. So I'll be posting about that. Also listen to the podcast. Every Monday I chat with Claudine, and every Wednesday I talk with a different person with French creativity, inspiration. It's La Vie Creative podcast. You can Google it or look for it on iTunes. And if you want more friends in your life, we both have Patreon pages, and on our Patreon, it's actually in the comments of this stream. So if you just go up to the comments of the stream, the the caption. You can find our Patreon pages. Mine more focuses on beautiful pictures of Paris, information about Paris, resources about artists. If you want to try some of your artistic creativity, I give you the resources from my guest. And we both have the Facebook page with the book club, which you need to join. And Claudine can tell you about her Patreon page as well.
Yeah, my Patreon just gives you even more Paris. So it will give you more stories. If there's a specific story that you've always wanted to know about, I'll even kind of write you your own personal history about that one thing that you've always wanted to know more about. But it also gives you discounts on my tours. It'll actually help you plan, depending on the level that it's at, it'll help you plan. I could help you plan your trip to Paris. So you could go there if it's your first time or your 10th time, whichever, whatever it is, I could definitely help you kind of find those things that aren't, that I write. There's so many things that I write about that are kind of off the beaten path that aren't the usual tourist things. And then also, if it's things like the Louvre and you're overwhelmed by the Louvre, I know the Louvre like the back of my hand. And so I could easily help you guide you through it and give you my tips and tricks and secrets of how to get there quicker.
You can prep for when the borders are open again.
Yeah.
Which we're hoping will be
by
soon.
September 3rd.
Yeah, exactly. That's when Colette arrives, September 3rd. So
I'm really hoping by then.
Thank you guys so much. And if you have any questions or comments after, leave them in the comment section and we will get back to you.
Yeah, and make sure you're celebrating Bestie Day on Tuesday, the best holiday of the 14th.
Year. And if you don't know what that is, look at our Instagrams. We'll be explaining that later.
And I'll actually have it in my newsletter, whole thing about it in my newsletter. I'm going to put out on Tuesday instead of Wednesday this week.
Perfect. All right, guys. We'll see you in a couple weeks. And don't forget about the book club. Message us if you are interested. See you later.
Thank you all. See you soon.
Guys.